And I spoke earlier this evening to Barry O'Farrell, Australia's High Commissioner to India, on this important story. High Commissioner, thank you for speaking to us. The virtual summit has just happened with your Prime Minister soon after the Japanese Prime Minister visited. Both are important members of the Quad, and it comes at a critical time. What were the big takeaways for Australia today?
The big takeaway, of course, is the India-Australia relationship, which continues to go from strength to strength, continues to have additional layers, and in doing so not only strengthens both economies but helps Australia and India to deliver on that free and open Indo-Pacific that they see as a shared commitment.
Well, one of the significant things the Australian Prime Minister said today was about this region facing increasing change and much pressure, and also discussing Russia's unlawful invasion of Ukraine, as he put it. Also talking about the consequences of this invasion for the Indo-Pacific region. Could you elaborate a bit on what those concerns were that were discussed?
Firstly, as they did when they met as part of the Quad in Melbourne in February, both leaders expressed concern about the situation in Ukraine and called for an immediate cessation in those hostilities. But as was again also evident at the Quad meeting in Melbourne, the fact is that it's not the only part of the world where there are players who are not respecting the rule of law, who are engaging in activities that are seeking to coerce countries. And the leaders again today highlighted the South China Sea as an area where China is deliberately flaunting rules and norms that the rest of us obey.
How do you see China's comments on the Quad, essentially comparing it to an Asian NATO, using the term dangerous? These were quite aggressive comments, weren't they?
And we've come to expect those sorts of comments from China on a whole range of subjects. Normally they don't make sense, normally they're often untrue. But the point is that the Quad is a foreign affairs forum where countries like the United States, Japan, India and Australia, and through them into ASEAN, talk about some of the pressing needs in the region, whether it's climate change, whether it's COVID, or whether it's the importance of having rules that are obeyed to ensure that, as in cricket, the game is not only played appropriately, but has a clear path.
Do you think that this is China's way of preparing the ground for a possible invasion of Taiwan? Is that a concern?
Well, I'm sure that that's concerns that have been expressed by commentators not only in Australia but here in India and probably across the region. And of course, one of the concerns and one of the reasons that the Australian government stands up to what happened in Ukraine is that if you ignore the United Nations, if you seek to subvert the status quo, disrespect boundaries, you send messages to others. And clearly, as my Prime Minister said in the press release 2 days ago, he was keen to discuss with Prime Minister Modi the implications for the Indo-Pacific of those events we're seeing in other parts of the world.
You've also said that there's an understanding in the Quad about India's position on Russia and Ukraine. Are you saying that there is no disquiet at all in the Quad over this issue?
Well, I think that's clear, because the bottom line is that all four countries that are members of the Quad met in Melbourne in February. They met in part to discuss the conflict in Ukraine and to assess the implication for stability in our region. And each Quad country made its position clear on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And we've seen since then Prime Minister Modi talking to the presidents of both countries, trying to do what other governments are trying to do, find a way through, create an atmosphere for a solution to be put in place, because we want to see an end of the hostilities that regrettably not only destroying property but more importantly costing lives.
But do you believe that as this war progresses and becomes more intense with more civilian targets and casualties, as is already happening, that India might have to change its stand?
I think India will do what all countries are seeking to do, is to use whatever influence they have with the leaders of those countries involved to try to effect a peaceful outcome. And I have to say that India's ability to extract more than 20,000 students from amidst a war zone speaks volumes of its capacity and the benefits of its approach to these sorts of situations.